What if everything you've been told about spiritual awakening is a lie? What if the bliss, the peace, the divine expansion you've been seeking isn't what awakening feels like at all? You've probably imagined enlightenment as a moment of profound clarity, a sudden transcendence into a state of eternal peace, a feeling of arriving at some higher plane where all your problems vanish, where suffering disappears, and where you finally feel whole. But the truth is, awakening is nothing like that. Awakening is not about gaining something. It is about losing everything you thought you were. It is not about feeling more in control. It is about realizing you were never in control to begin with. It is not about finding yourself. It is about seeing with undeniable clarity that there was never a self to find. You do not awaken by adding something new to your life. You awaken when everything falls away. And that process, that unraveling of illusion, it is not beautiful, it is not peaceful, it is terrifying. Because it is the death of everything you believed made you, you. The mind resists this at all costs. Because the mind does not want to awaken, it wants to survive. And it will do everything in its power to keep you from seeing the truth that your thoughts do not belong to you, that they arise and disappear on their own, like clouds in the sky, that the voice in your head, the one that has narrated your entire life, is not actually you, that every belief you hold, every identity you've constructed, every opinion you cling to is just a story that was never real to begin with. The moment you see this clearly, the moment the illusion collapses, the ego panics, because it knows that if you stop believing in it, it ceases to exist. This is why awakening feels nothing like you expect, because it does not feel like gaining knowledge, it feels like losing your mind. It does not feel like expansion, it feels like the walls of reality closing in, squeezing out every lie you've ever told yourself. It does not feel like bliss, it feels like death, the death of the one who was searching, the death of the one who was suffering, the death of the one who believed they were separate from life itself. And yet, despite the fear, despite the resistance, despite everything in you screaming to hold on to the familiar, something deeper emerges. A silence that was always there, beneath the noise, a presence that was never absent, even when the mind was at war, a knowing that cannot be explained, but can never be unseen. You begin to realize that you are not your mind, you are not your past, you are not the thinker, but the awareness behind the thoughts. And for the first time you see that everything you ever chased was an illusion. This is why awakening shatters lives, because once you see through the illusion you cannot go back. Old desires fall away, relationships crumble, the things you once valued suddenly feel meaningless, the identity you spent years constructing no longer fits, the story of you collapses, and with it the false sense of security you clung to. And this is where most people turn back. This is where they retreat into the mind, trying desperately to glue the pieces of their identity back together, because the ego will convince you that without it, you are nothing. But that is the final lie. Because beyond the fear, beyond the collapse, beyond the mind's desperate grip on control, there is something else, something untouched, something vast, silent, and infinite. The moment the illusion crumbles, what remains is the only thing that was ever real, and that is the pure awareness you have always been. Awakening does not make your problems disappear. It does not mean you float through life in a permanent state of bliss. Life continues. The body continues. Thoughts continue. The difference is they no longer own you. They no longer define you, because you are no longer lost in the illusion. But getting here? That is the part no one talks about, because it is not comfortable, it is not gentle, it is a dismantling, a breaking apart, a confrontation with everything you have spent your entire life avoiding. You will feel lost, you will feel like you are disappearing, you will question everything, because awakening does not reinforce the self, it erases it. And until you are ready to surrender, until you are ready to let go of the need to be someone, the suffering will continue, because suffering is simply the resistance to what is. This is why so many seekers never actually awaken. They want enlightenment, but they do not want to let go of the one who is seeking it. They want peace, but they do not want to dissolve the ego that creates their suffering. They want transcendence, but they do not want to die before they die. The truth is, you were never separate from reality. You were never separate from life itself. The idea of being a separate self was just that, an idea. And when that idea collapses, you do not disappear. You finally appear, not as a person, not as a thought, but as the formless, boundless awareness that has been here all along. And yet, even knowing this, the mind will still fight. It will still try to claim ownership of awakening. It will turn it into an experience, a concept, a badge of identity, because that is what the ego does. It takes truth and makes it personal. It makes it about itself. But awakening is not about the ego's journey. It is about seeing that there was never a journey at all. You do not wake up, you were never asleep. You do not find yourself, you were never lost. You do not become something new, you simply stop believing in what was never true. And in that moment, everything changes. Not because the world is different, but because the one who was looking for meaning, for purpose, for understanding is no longer there. There is only what is. There is only presence. There is only this. And that is enough. You might think that awakening will feel like coming home, like finally arriving at a place of perfect understanding, perfect peace. But the truth is, when awakening begins, it feels more like everything you have ever known is collapsing around you. Because the moment you begin to see through the illusion, the mind does not celebrate. It panics. It fights. It scrambles to hold on to something solid. But there is nothing left to hold. The foundation of your identity, the belief in a separate self, the narrative you've been telling yourself your entire life, it all begins to dissolve. And without those illusions, the question arises, who am I? What am I? At first, it feels like free falling into nothingness. The structures of meaning that once gave life its direction begin to feel arbitrary. The goals, the ambitions, the dreams that once felt so important suddenly seem empty. The roles you've played, friend, partner, worker, seeker, they no longer fit. And the most unsettling realization of all is that the person you thought you were never actually existed. It was just a collection of passing thoughts, of memories, of fleeting emotions stitched together into a story you called me. But now, that story is unraveling, and without it, what remains? This is why awakening feels nothing like what you expected. It is not a destination, it is not an achievement, it is not something you can claim as an identity. It is simply the realization that you were never the identity to begin with. And when that becomes clear, something else happens. A fear, deeper than anything you've ever known, arises. Because the ego is starting to see its own demise. And it will do everything in its power to pull you back into illusion. It will flood you with thoughts, with fear, with resistance. It will tell you that you are going crazy, that you are losing yourself, that if you let go completely you will disappear forever. And in a way the ego is right. You are disappearing, but not in the way the mind imagines. You are not losing yourself. You are losing the illusion of yourself. You are not falling into nothingness. You are falling into everything. And yet, in that moment it feels like death. It feels like something is being stripped away, like a skin being shed, like a fire consuming everything you once held on to. Because the ego cannot survive in the light of truth. It cannot coexist with awareness. And so it fights, it clings, it searches for something, anything to hold on to. It tries to rebuild itself with new beliefs, new ideas, new spiritual concepts. It tries to claim awakening as its own achievement. It tries to turn enlightenment into something personal. But that is just another illusion. Awakening does not belong to you. It never did, because the you that is trying to awaken was never real to begin with. This is why the path is so difficult. This is why so many turn back. Because awakening is not what the mind wants it to be. It is not a feeling of bliss. It is not the accumulation of spiritual knowledge. It is not an experience to be grasped. It is the stripping away of everything false. And when you have spent your entire life identifying with illusion, its loss feels unbearable. But here is the paradox. The moment you stop resisting, the moment you stop trying to hold on, the moment you allow the dissolution to happen completely, you see that there was never anything to fear, that what you were clinging to was never real, that what felt like dying was simply waking up from the dream. And when the dust settles, when the mind finally stops fighting, what remains is something so profoundly simple, so effortlessly present, that you wonder how you ever missed it. It was always here, beneath the noise, beneath the struggle, beneath the endless seeking. It was always here, waiting, silent, still, untouched by time, untouched by thought, untouched by the story of you. And in that silence you realized that there was never anything to attain. There was never anything to find, because you were never separate from it. You were always this. You were always here. The world does not change, the body does not change, the mind does not change, but something is different. The weight is gone. The illusion is gone. The desperate need to be someone, to get somewhere, to become something, it is gone. And in its place there is only now. There is only what is. There is only this. But the ego does not vanish overnight. It still tries to return. It still whispers in the background, trying to reassemble the illusion, trying to pull you back into its web. And sometimes it succeeds. Sometimes you get lost in thought again. Sometimes you find yourself caught in old patterns, in old fears, in old habits. But now there is a difference. Now you see it. Now you know. And the moment you see it, the illusion loses its power. The moment you notice that the ego has returned, it disappears. Because you are no longer identified with it. You are no longer trapped inside the dream. You are awake. And now life unfolds without resistance. Not because suffering no longer exists, but because there is no longer attachment to it. Not because challenges disappear, but because the one who struggled against them is no longer taken seriously. The waves continue to rise and fall, but there is no longer an illusion of drowning. There is only the vast, infinite ocean. This is what awakening is. It is not an experience. It is not a state of consciousness. It is not something to achieve. It is simply the end of believing in the false self. It is the final realization that you were never separate, that you were never incomplete, that you were never anything other than this moment, this presence, this awareness. And now, there is nothing left to seek, nothing left to find, nothing left to fix. There is only life, happening effortlessly as it always has. The dream is over. You are free. There comes a moment when you realize that everything you thought mattered doesn't. The things you worried about, the things you spent your life chasing, the things you once thought defined you, they all begin to fade like a dream upon waking. And at first, that realization is unsettling. It shakes you. Because if you are not your thoughts, if you are not your achievements, if you are not your memories, then who are you? What remains? And then, something unexpected happens. A silence you have never truly noticed before begins to emerge. Not the absence of sound, but the absence of resistance, the absence of struggle, the absence of the constant inner commentary that once dictated your every move. And in that silence, there is something else, an awareness, something that was always here, watching, witnessing, but never caught in the storm. And suddenly you understand. You are not the storm, you are the sky. This is why awakening is so disorienting. Because the person you thought you were, the one who suffered, the one who searched, the one who longed for meaning, was never real. It was just a character, a collection of ideas and conditioned responses, a mask you wore for so long that you forgot it was a mask. And now, as the illusion dissolves, as the grip of identity loosens, there is nothing left to hold on to, and the ego, sensing its own disappearance, panics. It will try to convince you that this is wrong, that something is missing, that you are losing yourself, that if you do not cling to a name, a role, a purpose, you will cease to exist. But that is the greatest lie of all, because you are not disappearing. You are finally appearing, not as a person, not as a thought, but as the awareness that was always here, hidden beneath the noise of the mind. This is why most people do not awaken, even if they spend their lives chasing it. because they are still searching for something to add. They want enlightenment to feel like an achievement, a grand realization that will elevate them above others, a spiritual trophy to wear. But real awakening does not feel like winning, it feels like losing. It feels like the collapse of everything you held onto for security. It feels like standing at the edge of a cliff, staring into nothingness, and realizing that nothingness is what you are. But then something miraculous happens, the fear subsides, the mind quiets, and in the place of all the illusions there is something so profoundly simple, so effortless, that you cannot believe you overlooked it for so long. Presence. Just this. Just life. Happening now. No past weighing you down, no future pulling you forward. Just this. And for the first time you see that nothing was ever missing. You see that you were never lost. You see that all the years spent searching, all the books read, all the practices, all the striving, it was all just the ego playing another game. Because the truth was never hidden, it was never far away, it was always here, right in front of you. But the mind does not give up so easily. It will try to return, it will try to pull you back into the illusion. It will whisper doubts, it will create new stories, it will cling to spiritual concepts, hoping to keep itself alive. And if you are not careful, you will believe it. You will think you have lost the awakening. You will think you need to get back to some special state of being. But that is just another trick, another illusion, because awakening is not a state. It is not a feeling. It is not something that comes and goes. It is simply the absence of illusion. And even if the illusion tries to return, even if the mind pulls you back into its stories, something is different now. Because now you see. Now you know. And once you know, you cannot unknow. Once you see the truth, you cannot unsee it. The dream may continue, but you are no longer trapped inside it. And now, life becomes simple. Not because challenges disappear, not because emotions stop, not because the world changes, but because your relationship to it does. You are no longer a separate person fighting against life. You are life itself. You are the awareness in which all things appear and disappear. You are the silent witness behind every experience. And from here everything flows effortlessly, because you no longer need to be someone. You no longer need to prove anything. You no longer need to hold on to the past or chase the future. There is no more resistance. There is only what is. You will laugh at how simple it is. You will wonder how you spent so many years missing something that was always right here, and you will see that the entire journey, the search, the struggle, it was never about finding anything. It was about losing what was never real. So now you let go, not as an act of will, not as something you do, but as something that happens naturally when you stop resisting. You let go of the stories, you let go of the mind's need to define itself, you let go of the illusion that you were ever separate from life, and in that letting go, you become what you always were. You become the silence, you become the space, you become the awareness that is already free. There is nothing left to seek, nothing left to hold on to, and yet, paradoxically, everything remains. Life continues, the body continues, the world continues, but now it is all seen as it truly is. Just movement, just experience, just an endless unfolding in the vast, infinite presence of what you are. And you realize that you were never lost, you were never broken, you were never anything other than this, and now the seeking ends. Now there is only being, now there is only freedom. There is a strange moment in awakening when you realize you have been fighting against nothing. You spent years resisting, searching, struggling to find truth, to understand, to reach some final destination of enlightenment, and then you see that the thing you were trying to overcome, the ego, the mind, the illusion, was never real to begin with. You were wrestling with a ghost, trying to escape a prison that didn't exist, trying to awaken from a dream that was never actually happening. And when that realization lands, something inside you softens. There is no longer anything to fix, no longer anything to figure out, no longer anything to become. You stop needing the mind to make sense of it all because you see that the mind itself was the veil keeping you from what has always been here. the endless thinking, the constant analysis, the relentless search for meaning, it all falls away. And what remains is something so simple, so effortless that you wonder how you missed it for so long. The present moment. Just this. Just life, exactly as it is. No longer filtered through a story, no longer judged as good or bad, no longer needing to be different. Just this, perfect in its absolute ordinariness. And at first the mind may resist this simplicity, it may try to complicate it. It may say it can't be this easy, it can't just be this, because the ego wants something dramatic. It wants a grand revelation. It wants an experience it can hold on to, something to claim, something to call my awakening. But awakening is not an experience. It is not a moment of cosmic fireworks. It is not a feeling of bliss that lasts forever. It is the falling away of everything false, leaving only the undeniable truth of what has always been. And when that truth is seen, everything changes. But nothing changes. The world is the same, the body is the same, life continues exactly as it always has. But you, the one who was caught in the illusion, the one who was tangled in the endless search, the one who suffered, are no longer there. Not because you disappeared, but because the idea of you was never real to begin with. And what takes its place is something the mind cannot grasp. Stillness, presence, a deep, wordless knowing that all is well even when nothing is perfect. A peace that has nothing to do with circumstances, a freedom that has nothing to do with escaping, a clarity that has nothing to do with understanding. And yet the mind will still try to return. It will try to claim this realization. It will try to turn it into something personal. It will say, I get it now, I understand. But that too is just another layer of illusion. Because there is no I that awakens. There is no one who attains this. There is only the falling away of what was never true. And this is where the last game of the ego plays out. It tries to rebuild itself, but in a more subtle way. It tries to create a new identity around awakening. It tries to turn enlightenment into a story, into an experience, into a personal achievement. And if you are not careful, you will believe it. You will think you have reached some higher state. You will think you are now different from others, more evolved, more awakened. But the moment you believe that, you are back in illusion. Because the truth is, there is no one to awaken, there is only life, unfolding as it always has. And once this is seen, the need to hold on to anything dissolves. There is no longer a need to be someone, no longer a need to have an identity, no longer a need to defend, to prove, to seek, to chase. Everything becomes effortless, not because there are no challenges, but because there is no longer resistance. No longer a self who is in conflict with life. And yet life continues. The body moves, thoughts still arise, emotions still come and go. But now they are like ripples on the surface of an infinite ocean. They do not disturb the depth beneath them. They do not define what is. They are just passing waves, momentary expressions of the same stillness from which everything arises. And this is why awakening is not what you expected. Because it does not give you anything. It takes everything away. Every illusion, every attachment, every false identity, every belief that kept you bound. And what remains is not something new, not something better, not something more. It is only what was always here. It is only the space, the silence, the awareness that was never born, never lost, never separate from anything. And now there is no longer a need to seek, no longer a need to find answers, no longer a need to hold on to a past or chase a future, because you see clearly that this moment, this breath, this awareness is all there ever was, and within it there is nothing missing. There is nothing to fix, there is nothing to attain. The seeker is gone, the search is over, and yet life continues, more vivid, more alive, more intimate than ever before, not because something has been added, but because nothing is being filtered anymore. No more stories, no more labels, no more need to control, just the raw, unfiltered reality of now. And now you are free. not in the way the mind imagined, not as a person who has attained some great state, but as the one who has finally stopped resisting, the one who has finally stopped believing in a self that was never there, the one who has finally woken up to the simplicity of what is. And in this simplicity there is nothing left to fear, nothing left to protect, nothing left to prove. There is only life, as it is, only awareness, witnessing it all. Only this, unfolding effortlessly, exactly as it has always been. At some point you realize there is no path, no steps, no journey, no final moment of arrival where everything makes sense and all is complete. You spent your life searching, believing that awakening was something in the distance, something to work toward, something that would happen in the future if you just tried hard enough, meditated long enough, read enough, understood enough. But then you see it. The seeking itself was the illusion. The one who was searching was never real, and everything you were looking for has always been right here. It was never hidden. It was never something you had to reach. It was only ever this. And when that truth sinks in, the entire structure of your mind collapses. Because if there is no path, no process, no journey, then what was all the effort for? What was all the struggle for? Why did you spend so many years trying to escape, trying to find, trying to become something else? And the answer is so simple, so obvious, that it is almost laughable. You never needed to become anything. You only needed to stop believing in what was never true. But the mind does not want to accept this. It wants a destination. It wants awakening to be something grand, something it can hold on to, something it can own. But awakening is not something you can possess. It is not an achievement. It is not a transformation of the person you thought you were. It is the realization that there was never a person to transform, that there was never a separate self to begin with, that life has only ever been happening effortlessly, without the need for you to control it. And so the search ends. Not because you found what you were looking for, but because you realize you were never lost. Not because you reached enlightenment, but because you see that enlightenment was never something to reach. It was only the absence of the illusion that you were separate from it. And now everything looks the same, but nothing is the same. You still wake up in the morning, you still eat, sleep, talk, laugh. The body moves, thoughts arise, emotions come and go. But there is no longer an identification with any of it. The weight, the heaviness, the constant struggle of trying to be someone, trying to get somewhere, it is gone. Life continues, but now it flows without resistance. And then something even stranger happens. You begin to see that everything is awake. That everything, every person, every tree, every moment is exactly as it should be. That nothing was ever wrong. That nothing was ever broken. That nothing ever needed to be fixed. The entire universe, every experience, every thought, every action is already perfect, not because it meets some ideal, but because it simply is. The mind may try to come back, may try to reassemble itself, may try to tell you that this cannot be it, that there must be more, that this realization is not enough. But now you see it for what it is, just another passing thought. Just another illusion, just another attempt of the ego to create a sense of control. And because you see it, because you no longer mistake it for reality, it has no power. The illusion can return, but it no longer owns you. And now life is free, not because circumstances change, but because the one who was bound by them is no longer taken seriously. You are no longer afraid of the future, because you see that the future is just a thought appearing in the now. You are no longer burdened by the past, because you see that the past only exists as a memory arising in the present, and when past and future lose their grip, what remains is this moment, completely untouched, completely full, completely whole. And in this moment there is no lack, there is no fear, there is no need for anything to be different, because for the first time you are truly here, not lost in the mind, not lost in the story, just here, just awake, just being. And the irony is, this was always the case. It was always this simple. It was always this clear. You were just looking for something else, something more, something bigger. But awakening is not big. It is not dramatic. It is not some mystical event that shatters the world. It is just this ordinary, quiet, simple moment. The sky does not celebrate when the clouds disappear. The ocean does not rejoice when the waves settle. And awakening does not make a sound when the illusion is seen through, because it was always here. It never left. It never changed. You only imagined it was something far away. And now you see that you were never separate from anything, that life itself is awake, moving effortlessly through you, as you, without the need for a separate self to claim it. That even in the moments when the mind tried to hold on, even in the moments when the ego resisted, even in the moments of fear, of doubt, of confusion, awakening was already happening. Because awakening is not something you do, it is what you are. And now there is nothing left to chase, nothing left to hold onto, and yet, paradoxically, nothing is lost. Everything remains. The body still moves, the mind still thinks, the world still unfolds. But now it is all seen as a dance, as a movement, as a passing flow of experience within the vast stillness of what you are. And in that stillness, there is peace. Not a peace that comes and goes, not a peace that depends on external conditions, but a peace that was never absent, a peace that was only obscured by the noise of seeking, by the belief in separation, by the illusion of the mind's control. And now the illusion has lost its grip, the veil has lifted, the dream has ended, and what remains is the only thing that was ever real: presence, awareness. Life happening effortlessly, without effort, without struggle, without the need for anyone to claim it. And so you walk through the world, the same as before, yet entirely different. There is nothing left to prove, nothing left to defend, nothing left to become, only this moment, unfolding as it always has, only this breath, only this step, only this infinite now, stretching forever into itself. And the search is over, not because you found the answer, but because you see clearly that there was never a question. There is a moment in awakening when you realize that everything you feared losing was never truly yours to begin with. You spent your life holding on, gripping tightly to ideas, to identities, to the belief that you were someone traveling through time, moving toward some final destination of fulfillment. But that destination never existed, and now, as the illusion unravels, as the weight of the past dissolves, there is only one thing left. This, just life, happening, without anyone inside of it controlling the flow. And yet, for so long you were convinced that you were the one steering the ship, that your thoughts were your own, that your choices were freely made, that your actions were the result of your personal will. But now you see it. The body moves, the heart beats, thoughts appear and disappear, and not once did you control any of it. Not once did you decide to be here in this moment. It has all been unfolding on its own, effortlessly, without the need for a separate self to manage it. And at first that realization is unsettling. The mind wants to resist. It wants to believe it is in control. It wants to believe that without its interference everything will fall apart. But the irony is, the moment you let go, the moment you stop trying to control, life flows more smoothly than ever before. The need to force disappears. The need to chase dissolves. And everything begins to happen with a natural ease, as if you were never the doer at all. Because you never were. You were never the one making life happen. You were simply watching it happen, believing the story that you were the one in charge. But the story was never real. The I that you thought you were was never real. And now that you see through the illusion, everything is lighter. Everything is simpler. Because you are no longer burdened by the exhausting need to be someone. And yet, nothing on the outside has changed. The world is still the world, the people in your life still go about their days. The events, the situations, the circumstances, they all continue as they always have. But something within you is different. The constant inner dialogue that once dictated your reality is quieter now. The need to defend yourself, to prove yourself, to define yourself has vanished. And for the first time you feel what it is like to be truly free. Not the freedom the mind imagined. Not the freedom of having more, achieving more, becoming more. but the freedom of having nothing to hold on to, the freedom of knowing that there is no self to protect, the freedom of seeing that everything you once resisted was only resisted because you believed you were separate from it. But you are not separate. You never were. You were not born into this life. You are life. You are not moving through time. You are what time moves through. You are not something small, contained, limited to a body, a name, a story. You are the vast, limitless awareness in which all things appear and disappear. And now, you do not need to believe this. You see it. You feel it. It is no longer a concept. It is no longer something to understand. It is simply the undeniable reality of what you are. And now the fear is gone. The fear of the future, the fear of loss, the fear of not being enough. Because all fear was rooted in the illusion of separation, in the belief that you were something fragile, something temporary, something that could be hurt, broken, or taken away. But when you see clearly, when the illusion collapses, you know without a doubt that you were never in danger, that nothing real can be lost, that you as awareness itself, as life itself, are untouchable. And from this place, life takes on a new rhythm. The effort is gone. The struggle is gone. Not because challenges no longer arise, not because the world suddenly becomes perfect, but because there is no longer resistance. Everything is allowed. Everything is embraced. Everything is seen as part of the infinite unfolding of this moment. And what a relief that is. To no longer fight, to no longer resist, to no longer carry the unbearable weight of trying to be something. There is no longer a story to maintain, no longer a role to play. There is only this effortless being, this endless presence, this quiet, boundless awareness that has always been here. And the mind will try to label it, it will try to call it enlightenment, it will try to turn it into something special, something mystical, something profound. But the truth is, there is nothing special about it. It is the most ordinary thing in the world. It is what has always been. It is what you were before you learnt your name, before you learnt to identify with thoughts, before you learnt to separate yourself from life. And now, you see that you were never separate. The trees, the wind, the passing clouds, the sound of footsteps on the pavement, all of it is you. All of it is arising within you. All of it is appearing and disappearing in the space of your own awareness. And because of that, nothing is missing. Nothing has ever been missing. And in this, there is peace. A peace that is not dependent on circumstances. A peace that is not something you feel, but something you are. A peace that does not come and go because it is not attached to any experience. It is simply the natural state of what remains when all illusion is gone. And now there is nothing left to search for. No more questions that need answering. No more desire to escape what is. Just a simple, quiet, effortless being. Just life, moving as it always has. And you realize that this was always here. That you never needed to do anything to reach it, that the only thing that ever stood in the way was the belief that you were something separate, something incomplete, something on a journey toward something greater. But there is no journey, there never was. There is only this, there is only now, there is only the silent, infinite awareness in which everything rises and falls. And you are that. You have always been that. And now, the illusion is gone. There is nothing left to wait for, no future moment when it all makes sense, no final realization that completes the puzzle, no moment of arrival where you finally become what you were always meant to be, because the moment you are waiting for is already here. The awakening you seek is not coming, it has never left. It is not something to attain, it is what you are. But the mind will tell you otherwise. The mind will tell you that you need more time, more practice, more effort. The mind will create obstacles, conditions, requirements, because the mind survives by keeping you searching. The mind does not want awakening. The mind wants the chase. Because the moment you see through the illusion, the mind is no longer the master. It is no longer in control. And that is the one thing it cannot accept. And so it fights. It tells you that you are not ready, that you must meditate more, that you must understand more, that you must fix yourself before you can awaken. But what is there to fix? What is there to attain? You have spent your whole life trying to become something, trying to improve, trying to evolve into someone worthy of peace, of freedom, of enlightenment. But what if none of that was necessary? What if everything you've been seeking is already here, hidden beneath the belief that you must search for it? The truth is, you do not need to awaken, you do not need to find your true self, because you are already here. The only thing preventing you from seeing it is the belief that you are not, the belief that you are something small, something separate, something incomplete. But the moment you stop believing in the mind's stories, the moment you stop identifying with the voice in your head that tells you what you are, all that remains is presence. All that remains is this. And now, for the first time, you can truly see, life is not happening to you, life is happening as you. You are not separate from it, you are not outside of it looking in. You are the space in which it unfolds, the witness to every thought, every emotion, every experience. And when you see this clearly, the weight of existence lifts, because there is no longer anyone struggling to control it, no longer anyone searching for meaning, no longer anyone resisting what is. And yet, everything continues. The world still moves, the body still acts, the mind still thinks, but there is no longer a center, no longer a self at the core of it all, trying to hold it together. There is only life, flowing as it always has. And within that flow, there is no more fear, no more tension, no more need to hold on to anything. And you begin to laugh, because it is all so simple, so obvious, so effortless. You were never lost, you were never broken, you were never separate, you only imagined that you were. You only believed in a story that was never true. And now the story is gone, the illusion is gone, but life remains, more vivid, more alive, more real than ever before. Because now there is no filter, no veil between you and reality, no false self standing in the way. There is only this moment, exactly as it is. And this is freedom, not the freedom to control life, but the freedom of no longer needing to, not the freedom of escaping suffering, but the freedom of knowing that suffering was only ever the resistance to what is, not the freedom of becoming something greater, but the freedom of realizing you already are. And so, the search ends, not in some dramatic moment of enlightenment, not in a feeling of ecstasy or bliss, but in the simple, quiet recognition that nothing was ever missing, that life was always whole, that you were never separate from it. And now there is nothing left to hold on to, nothing left to fear, nothing left to seek. There is only life, unfolding as it always has, only this breath, only this step, only this infinite, boundless presence, stretching endlessly into itself. And in that presence there is peace, not a peace that comes and goes, not a peace that depends on circumstances, but a peace that was never absent, a peace that was always here, waiting to be seen, a peace that is not something you feel, but something you are. And now you walk through the world as you always have, but everything is different. Not because anything has changed, but because there is no longer anyone demanding that it change, no longer anyone trying to control it, no longer anyone resisting the way things are. And so, the effort is gone, the struggle is gone, and in its place there is only ease, only stillness, only the deep, wordless knowing that life is exactly as it should be. And for the first time, you are truly free. Not free as a person, not free as an individual, but free from the idea that you were ever separate from anything, free from the illusion of self, free from the weight of believing you needed to be something more. And now life continues, as it always has, as it always will, but you are no longer bound by it, no longer trying to control it, no longer lost in the illusion of seeking, because you are here, and that is enough. That has always been enough. There is no destination, no final step, no point where you arrive and suddenly everything becomes complete. The search was always an illusion, a game played by the mind to keep itself alive, to keep itself important. But now the game is over. The illusion is seen for what it is, And what remains is something so simple, so effortless, that the mind cannot grasp it. There is just this, just life, moving, changing, appearing and disappearing, without any need for a separate self to control it. For so long you believed that you were the one making things happen, that you were the thinker of thoughts, the doer of actions, the creator of your own destiny. But now you see that everything, every thought, every movement, every decision, was simply arising on its own, without any effort from you. The mind tried to claim ownership of it all, tried to take credit, tried to weave a story of control. But in truth you were never in control, you were never the one pulling the strings. And in that realization something strange happens. Instead of fear, there is relief. Instead of panic, there is peace. Because the weight of trying to be someone, trying to figure it all out, trying to control what was never yours to control, is gone. There is no longer a need to force anything. No longer a need to struggle. No longer a need to protect a self that never really existed. Life simply flows, and now you let it. And yet, the world still appears as it always has. The same streets, the same sky, the same people. But something is different. The way you see, the way you experience, the way you exist within it all has shifted. There is no longer an imaginary boundary between you and life. No longer a feeling of being separate, of being inside a body looking out at the world. The boundary was never real. The separation was never real. And now you are what you have always been. Nothing and everything, nowhere and everywhere. Not a person moving through life, but life itself, moving. And the mind will try to return. It will whisper doubts. It will ask questions. It will try to pull you back into its web of thoughts. It will tell you that something is missing, that you have lost something, that you need to go back, to find the person you once were. But you cannot go back. Not because something has changed, but because now you see that the person you thought you were was never there, and you cannot unsee the truth once it has been revealed. So now you let the mind do what it does, you let the thoughts come and go, you let the emotions rise and fall, but none of it belongs to you anymore, none of it defines you, none of it needs to be controlled. There is no longer an attachment, no longer a personal story wrapped around everything that happens. Things simply happen. Just as the wind blows, just as the rain falls, just as the waves rise and crash, life continues. But now there is no one suffering inside of it. And that is the great paradox, that the freedom you sought was never about gaining anything. It was never about reaching some higher state. It was only ever about losing what was never real, losing the false self, losing the illusion of control, losing the need to be someone. And in losing everything, you gain everything. In letting go of the one who struggled, the struggle disappears. In surrendering the fight, you realize there was never an enemy. And now, life is effortless, not because challenges do not arise, not because pain no longer exists, but because there is no longer resistance. There is no longer a self who suffers. There is only life, playing out exactly as it is meant to. There is only what is, without the need for it to be different. And so you move through the world as you always have, but lighter. There is nothing left to carry, no past weighing you down, no future pulling you forward, no identity to protect, no image to maintain, no self to defend. There is only this. Only now. Only the infinite unfolding of presence, stretching endlessly into itself. And with that comes the deepest peace, a peace that does not come and go, a peace that does not depend on anything, a peace that was never something to be found, but something that was always here, hidden beneath the noise of seeking. And you laugh at the absurdity of it all, that you spent so many years searching for something that was never lost, that you struggled for so long to become something that you already were, that you tried so desperately to hold on to a self that never existed. And now the struggle is over, the seeking is over, the illusion has dissolved. And what remains is everything. What remains is nothing. What remains is life, simply as it is, without the need for a story, without the need for meaning, without the need for anything other than this moment, exactly as it is. And now there is nowhere to go, nothing to become, nothing to achieve. The game is over. And yet, life continues. The sun still rises, the heart still beats, the world still moves. But now, it is all happening without effort, without struggle, without the weight of a self trying to control it. And so you let go completely, not as an act of will, not as something you do, but as something that happens naturally when you see that there was never anything to hold on to. There was never a self who was in control. There was never a need to resist the flow. And now there is only flow. Only the endless, infinite unfolding of what is. Only the simple, quiet, effortless being that was always here, waiting to be noticed. And so the search ends. Not because you have found the answer, but because you realize there was never a question. There is nothing left to seek, nothing left to chase. The idea that you were ever incomplete was only ever a trick of the mind. The illusion that something was missing, that you needed to find yourself, that you needed to awaken. It was all just another story. And now, the story has ended. Not because you found some grand answer, not because you reached some final enlightened state, but because you finally see that there was never a question to begin with. The seeking was the illusion. The self that wanted to awaken was the illusion, and now that self is gone. Not destroyed, not erased, but simply seen for what it always was, a passing thought, a fleeting idea, a mask that was worn for a time and then set down when it was no longer needed. And now there is only what remains. Pure, effortless being. No longer a person trying to control life, no longer a mind trying to make sense of it all. Just life happening, just existence unfolding, just this, always this, exactly as it is. And the great paradox is that nothing has changed, yet everything is different. The world still moves, time still passes, the body still breathes, but the one who was trying to manage it all, the one who was trying to find meaning, to make sense of the journey, to hold everything together, that one is no longer here, and in its absence there is peace. Not a peace that depends on circumstances, not a peace that can be disturbed, but the kind of peace that was never absent to begin with. The kind of peace that was only obscured by the mind's endless need to define, to explain, to resist. And now resistance is gone. Life no longer needs to be anything other than what it is. The mind no longer needs to grasp but meaning. The heart no longer needs to cling to desires. The body no longer needs to fight against the flow of time. Everything simply is, and that is enough. And now you walk through the world, the same as before, yet entirely different. You speak, you laugh, you cry, you move. But none of it is personal. None of it is bound to a self that needs to be protected, to a story that needs to be upheld, to an identity that needs to be maintained. The weight of me has fallen away, and in its place there is only lightness, there is only stillness, there is only this. And in this, everything is welcomed, the highs, the lows, the joy, the sorrow. There is no preference, no resistance, no need for anything to be different. Because for the first time, you are no longer separate from life, no longer an outsider looking in, no longer a mind trying to rearrange the universe into something more comfortable, more predictable, more controllable. There is only the realization that everything is already perfect, not perfect in the way the mind once imagined, not perfect in some idealized sense, but perfect simply because it is, perfect because it could not be any other way. And so there is no longer the need to search, no longer the need to fix, no longer the need to improve or evolve or become something more, because the one who wanted all those things, the one who believed they were not enough, the one who spent their life seeking, it was never real. And now all that remains is what has always been, still, silent, present, complete. And the mind may still try to return, it may still try to convince you that this is not enough, that something is missing, that you should return to the search, to the chase, to the endless cycle of seeking and becoming. But now you see it for what it is, a whisper, a thought, a passing cloud in the vastness of the sky. And just like a cloud, you let it come and go. No need to cling to it, No need to push it away. Just watching, just witnessing, just being. And this is freedom. Not the freedom to escape life, but the freedom of being fully immersed in it, without attachment, without resistance, without the illusion of separation. The freedom of knowing that you were never bound, that the prison was never real, that the door was always open, waiting for you to see, that you were never locked inside. And now you are free. Not because you fought your way here, not because you earned it, not because you finally solved the puzzle. You are free because you see, beyond all doubt, that you were never anything but free. And with that, the last illusion dissolves. And now there is nothing left to do, nothing left to say, no final step, no last lesson, no great realization waiting to be uncovered. There is only life as it is, without the need to be anything else. There is only now, endless and infinite, stretching forever into itself. There is only the quiet, still, boundless presence of being, watching the waves rise and fall, watching the sun set and the stars appear, watching as all things come and go, knowing that in the end, nothing is ever lost. And with that, the search is over. Not because you found what you were looking for, but because you finally understand that you were never lost to begin with.